Hello, I am Linus, and today we're going to start with some simple stuff on FL Studio 12. Um, we're going to start with the most simplest thing in the world, which is the channel rack. Channel rack is probably the livelihood, I don't know why, lack of a better word, you're going to be using this 100% of the time in FL Studio. It's where you're going to basically make patterns, right? Basically, this is the playlist. This is like your artwork, kind of. This is kind of like the building of your track or your song of whatever you're making, right? Of your score or of whatever, of a score of a movie or whatever. This is your building, the playlist. This is what we call it, the playlist. This whole thing, and we put patterns on it, right? Well, this playlist needs pieces to build it, obviously. And that's what the patterns basically are. They're the pieces to build the whole entire thing. So I'm just going to show you how the patterns basically work. Obviously, you can bring in samples, and samples you can find on the left side. If you can't find out if the samples aren't there, you're like, why aren't they here? Click this little thing right here. It says, if you can see everything in the top left corner, it'll show like in that little visualization bar, view browser and plugin picker. You can enable that right there. And this is default. You will have default things to use an FL. I'm just going to use that throughout all the tutorials, just because I don't want to use samples you guys don't have. So go into here, packs. You should have that if you have FL Studio. These are the default samples you have, except this one. I created this one myself. Go under like kicks or something. Usually you'll start with a template that has one. So if you do, that's great. I'm gonna go ahead and add some kicks for myself. You can go ahead and replace the kicks and stuff that you have there if you want. Usually the stock kicks and snares that it gives you is usually very noticeable by the community of producers and aren't really that great. So I would recommend changing them, but just for this tutorial it doesn't really matter what you use. Obviously we're just going to be using. Alright, so I'm just going to teach you guys a little bit about how to lay out drums and basically how to use everything. So as you can see, you can drag and draw and all this stuff, and that's what a lot of starter producers do. They just kind of hope things happen when and that's right. That's what I hear a lot of the time, and that's not really how you're supposed to do it. And even though it seems fun, I did a lot of studying before I actually went into making my first track. I didn't touch the sequencer. I didn't touch anything. I watched videos. I talked to people. If you right-click on any of your samples, you get these options. And it seems overwhelming. It really does. But there's these fill options. And these are very, very handy when trying to make small beats. And I would recommend, first let's look at the kick. Now the kick is kind of the leading factor of every electronic song, if we're talking about electronic music at least. And when we are talking about 4/4 at least, when we're talking about time signatures, we would like to fill in every 4 steps. Now we're talking about every 4 steps in the sequencer, which is every 4 beats in every measure, however you want to. I'm not exactly sure because I'm not really that great of a musical person, but if you have a better way of explaining that to yourself, then that's great. But it basically fills in every 4 steps in the sequencer for you. Obviously I could do that for myself, but that's just an easier way to just automatically do that. Saves time, and it's just a great way if you're learning how to produce. Then it's an easy way to just make yourself learn, and an easy way to start making beats early. Now this is what it sounds like. Now obviously, if you're the starting BPM of FL Studio, and BPM is beats per minute, that's how fast the track is going to go, which is up here. You can drag it up and down. House music is always going to be 128. 128 is the magic number for house music and anything that isn't associated with the genre. So yeah, that's four on the floor kick, or as you would call it. So yeah, you can play around with this. You can, so like a build up would be something like this, and then you could fill in every second step, and then, right? That's kind of how your drop would go, you know? But we're just gonna stick with making simple beats for now. I'm just explaining as we go, right? Alright, so now you have your snare clap. Snare clap and your clap are kind of your other just percussive type of things. You can make alternating type melodies with these. So I can say every other 1, 2, 3, every other third step off the first kick, whatever, however you would say that. So obviously it doesn't sound that great, but when we add the other elements in, I'm sure it will. Obviously, you kind of, the big thing about making beats here is that you can, is like kind of not, it's not necessarily it will always sound good if it's balanced, but balance will usually guarantee most of the time that your beats will sound good. But that is not a rule of thumb that you should always necessarily take with you. But just as something to take to mind, sometimes having a beat that's, you know, that has some balance in it sometimes will sound good. Now, hi-hats, they are the high-end percussion that is not technically always needed in a track, but is most of the time always used. They are kind of always in the background. I'm not using the mixer. You should really use the mixer channels when doing this. We'll talk about that in another episode, but for now, if you're just on the go, quick mixing, you can use the volume channel right here on samples. You have pitch. I never usually mess with pitch. You have your volume, VOL, volume. You can always right click it to reset it really quickly. And your panning, which is panning it left and right from ear to ear. So that's how you change the volume if you wanted to. It's also right here on the sequencer. That's your volume on your right, and panning on your left. Right click, and then do that to reset it. Now, our hi-hats, I'm just going to do a simple fill 2 each step. So it's going to sound like this. I'm actually going to change this up as I go, so it sounds a little bit smoother, you know. So that sounds like a natural house beat right there, you know. And you can always play around with this, you know. But always don't always just randomly paint your beats. Try using these fills and then build off of that. That's a big stepping stone of just, you know, making beats and using the sequencer correctly. I would recommend, for starting out, not going past four of these colored steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you know, one of these beats, I wouldn't recommend drawing past one of these, you know, just because, you know, it's a stepping stone, and you have to get used to just drawing small and then getting bigger as we go. I'm just talking as we go, just to kind of give you advice as I'm going. Claps, just kind of another one of those. They're kind of, it's kind of like the snare clap, kind of one of those alternating things, but you can kind of put them anywhere. So, obviously I put that, I have my whole track, I have my own template to be organized here, but, so I'm just going to paint this here. You can do this one of two ways when putting it on the playlist, and obviously I drew this on pattern 1. It says pattern 1. Obviously when I scroll up and down the patterns, it's nowhere else, so this is pattern 1. And then I can go to the little pencil on the taskbar here and draw it that way and just move it around to where I want it to. Or, so you can do this one of two ways. You can either take the pencil and you can do it manually like this, or you can take the paintbrush and slide it across like this and paint it. That's a really handy tool to know, and you can kind of just go through here and, you know, look at the different things up here in the taskbar and just try them out and see what they do. Different really handy tools for production in FL. But anyway, so I'm just going to take the paintbrush, put it on the first 3, and I'm actually going to put this one on the 4th one. And this is what I'm going to do. For the 4th one, on that 4th beat, number 4, I'm going to go to the pattern 1 in the playlist, where there's a little piano symbol right there. I don't know if you see it. Right there on pattern 1, I'm going to not just left click it, and there's a make unique. Basically what this does is it takes that pattern and it takes that same pattern, copies it and pastes it onto the next pattern, and makes it unique. I mean, like, that's what it does. It takes the same pattern, right, and puts it onto another one, so we can change it and do what we want to it. So this is what we can do. So like in the track. It's like, let's actually change up that clap pattern. So. So that's how your basic house beat would go, because you have a beat, a beat, a beat, and then your last beat on beat 4 would be your transition into your next measure. So that's kind of how the basic house beat goes, I guess. Obviously, it gets more complex as you get more into producing. I'm just showing you how the sequencer works, and things like that. So I hope this helped out, helped with the sequencer a little bit, and showed what it's made for a little bit. I'll do the mixer next, and some EQing tips with that, and with the same project. I'm gonna try to do a whole project tutorial based off just one project. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next one.